It's a waiver wire Wednesday, and we're rolling into week 4. That means we're going to talk about some of the top trending players off the waiver wire for fantasy leagues. But before we dig in, you need to click that subscribe button right now. We're talking about the waiver wire every day. We're doing deep dives on these players with the You Need series. We're going to have a lot of those videos coming out today. At the end of the week, we're going to use these videos to help you set your lineups and look at these players from a deeper perspective. Click that button. Stop missing out. But the first player we're going to talk about today went off last week. He was a huge waiver wire get last week, but he's still sitting on a lot of waiver wires. If you watch this channel, more than likely you picked him up last week, but it's Jauan Jennings. And he went off, caught 3 touchdowns, was the top scorer in PPR last week, and was looking good. We ran a lot of routes. We doubled up on the targets, more than doubled up actually, because week 1 we saw 5, week 2 we saw 4. Deebo Samuel was out. He should be out a few more weeks. That being said, Jennings should at least see more or stay at around 5 targets a game. So we're looking at like a 5+ target a game wide receiver as long as Deebo is out. So the work rate's going to be there. He's going to be in on like 90% of the routes. So the work's there. We just got to see if it happens from a fantasy point perspective. And the ADOT is good. 12.4 average depth of target. That's on 12 targets last week, so it's a good sample for that. So we're getting targets deeper downfield. We're getting good volume. We're running a lot of routes, and the workload's there. That's all you can really say about that. And you let the chips fall when a player's getting this type of workload. The odds are greater in their favor. Zach Ertz is seeing workload, especially for a tight end. He scored just 8.3 fantasy points last week, but 5 targets and a 21.7% target share. So the target share is what you want to chase. You want to chase the volume. You also want to chase the routes. We're pushing 80% route participation rate. So we're on the field. We're in a position to score fantasy points. And with it being the tight end position, you just let the chips fall where they may, but he's getting volume. 5 targets. 21.7% target share, 10 fantasy points in week 2. Jaden Daniels dialing things up back there, and he's really starting to kick it in stride. Zach Ertz, cheap buy off the waiver wire. Bucky Irving is a hot commodity right now off the waiver wire. The running back position does not have any big gets right now off the waiver wire. Has not been too hot because we don't have any huge injuries, and you're not going to have huge injuries every week, but he saw a good opportunity share last week. Looked like the most efficient running back running the football between him and Rachaad White. He's getting work in the passing game, and he's carving out more work each week. He's only 3 games into his career. He's already getting a lot of usage, so he might get more down the line. He's a stash plus. You can use him for spot stars, but you're also watching him because he might end up with more opportunity later in the season. Sam Darnold is looking good. He looked good in training camp. We talked about it when we were looking at training camp clips all off season long. He was going to be the starter over McCarthy, and he only had like a few practices where McCarthy was starting to get some of that lead over him. But Sam Darnold held it down even before the McCarthy injury, and he's lighting it up with Justin Jefferson. He's got weapons here. He's accurate. He's getting the ball out. We're seeing a resurgence from him. He's a guy to get if you're hurting at quarterback. So if I'm like the bottom 3 or 4 teams in my 12-team league, then I'm looking at Sam Darnold if I'm hurting at quarterback. Quentin Johnston scored a touchdown. We got more fantasy points out of him last week. He's getting a lot of opportunity, running on almost 90% of the routes. He's out there. He's getting targets, but only 2 last week, but it was a weird game script against Pittsburgh. But we're getting good ADOT. We're getting volume here, and he is going to be a guy that's going to be up and down. He will have his down games. That's just part of the nature of Quentin Johnston and fantasy football, but the volume's there. The route participation rate's there, and he's a trend to get off the waiver wire. Mike Gesicki is another tight end to look at. 5 targets last week, but 16 fantasy points the week prior. He's getting opportunity, especially around the goal line, and he's a guy you just throw out there if you need a tight end you're playing the matchups with. And Mike Gesicki is getting some work here in Cincinnati. Cam Akers was in a bad game script last week. Joe Mixon might be out again, and if he's out again, you're just chasing the touches and opportunity share. You may not need to start him if you're good at running back, but you may want to have him on your team so nobody else can get a running back that's getting touches. But if the Texans are up, they're going to run it a little bit more, which means Cam Akers could be getting more opportunity. And that being said, he could cross the goal line, could get more favorable situations to run through. That being said, he's not a must get, but he is a running back that if Joe Mixon is out, he's going to be getting more touches. And if you're chasing touches, this is another guy to chase for those touches. Wan'Dale Robinson is getting targets. This is the Malik Neighbors show here in New York, but he's getting volume. 12 targets week 1, 4 in week 2, so a little bit lower there, but 8 last week. 31 routes ran with a 77.5% route participation rate. He's getting the short targets. He's getting a 2.4 average depth of target, so he's right around the line of scrimmage. Really, if Malik Neighbors isn't there downfield, they're going Wan'Dale Robinson. That's pretty much what that says. If Malik Neighbors isn't there downfield, they're going Wan'Dale Robinson. Remember, week 2, Malik Neighbors had 18 targets, and we saw a big decrease in Robinson's targets. Last week, Neighbors had 12. So now we're looking at Wan'Dale Robinson as a guy who's going to rack up targets. That will lead to some fantasy production, probably like a 10 to 13 spot week to week. Maybe some down games here and there, maybe some spike weeks if he scores touchdowns. But the work is there. Cordarrelle Patterson. If Najee is out and if Jalen Warren's out, you're chasing the touches, and that's about it. I can't guarantee you fantasy points. I don't feel super safe with him, but I do guarantee he will get touches in the passing game, and he will get carries if they're out, and some people need that. Probably the bottom 3 to 4 teams in every league probably need that, either at flex or at their RB2, because they're hurting at running back, especially if you're hurting at running back and you need somebody else, or if you need somebody in there to play the matchups with, or you need to pick them up so nobody else can get a running back with touches. Watch Cordarrelle Patterson. Justin Fields is always a get off the waiver wire because he runs the ball. He's got speed to burn in the open field. He can always get it. He can always give you that QB1 week. Again, bottom 3 to 4 teams in every league should be thinking about him if they're hurting at quarterback, because you probably don't have one that's top tier. Braelon Allen is a stash plus because he can get you production even as a backup, even as a handcuff, but he should be rostered. If you're watching my channel week in and week out, you have him rostered because we talk about Braelon Allen a lot. I might have to do another you need video because he needs stashed in all leagues. Darnell Mooney is a wide receiver who's going to get volume, who's going to be in game scripts where it's going to be very potent for his fantasy potential. He will have down games because there's Drake London and Kyle Pitts there, but he's going to have upside week to week. And you're looking at Tyrone Tracy here for the Giants. He's got a lot of pop. We liked him coming out of Purdue. 5 rushing attempts. The volume's starting to increase. The snap share's starting to increase. If Devin Singletary goes out, you're going to want Tyrone Tracy. Jalen Tolbert's getting a lot of workload and opportunity, but the average depth of target's there. He's also running about an 80% route participation rate. Hit over 100 air yards in the right matchup against Baltimore as the Cowboys were behind. So he's going to splash somewhere down the line. In the last 2 weeks for fantasy wasn't too bad. The 14 and 13 PPR fantasy points. So if you're looking for a wide receiver on the back end of your roster, this might be a guy to look at because he's starting to carve out more workload as the games go on. Rico Dowdle, I'm not in love with him, but if you're chasing running backs for touches, he's there on the waiver wire. He is starting to get a little bit more workload. The snap share's hovering around 45% per game. We're getting some work out of the passing game. We're getting runs up the gut. And if the Cowboys are behind, he's going to get more targets. That being said, Rico Dowdle is a guy to pay attention to. Jalen Nailor. With Jordan Addison out, Hawkinson out, he's going to get more opportunity. Back-to-back games where he ran 100% of the routes and 34 yards in this matchup. Sam Darnold's whipping the ball out. Very good. He's getting a lot of opportunity here in Minnesota. Emanuel Wilson is a top-tier handcuff. Marshawn Lloyd's banged up. We got Josh Jacobs there. He was struggling in week 3. He's also an older running back, and also this is a good offense, especially when Love's back. So if something happens to Josh Jacobs, then Emanuel Wilson could be the guy. He's looking good with the ball in his hands. He's looking good up the gut. He's looking good in open space. He's not super flashy, which is great because not everybody's going to run to him, but he can suck up volume and get you yards on the ground. Alexander Mattison's sharing the backfield here in the Raiders, getting a lot of targets here, getting some opportunity. I don't really want this Raiders backfield. I really don't want Zamir White or Alexander Mattison, but if you have to, you have to, and that's how the running back game is played. Ty Chandler's got a lot of upside here, especially if something happens to Aaron Jones. He's got 4.3 speed. He's taking about 7 to 10 rushing attempts per game. game. He's getting targets out of the backfield in some games as well, behind Aaron Jones. But if something happens to Aaron Jones, who suffered some injuries last year, then Ty Chandler could be a guy to chase off the waiver wire. Antonio Gibson is underrated right now because he saw a 50% opportunity share last week. Didn't amount to much in fantasy production, but you want to chase the work because everybody's chasing the fantasy production, and the work is going to lead to fantasy production. He's getting more and more work each week. He's also getting more snaps, and he is the straight-up cuff to Ramondre Stevenson. If Stevenson goes out, he's going to get 20 opportunities a game, which is going to allow him to be very good in fantasy, at least give you upside from week to week. Ray Davis, like always, scored a touchdown in their blowout against the Jaguars, and if something happens to James Cook, he is the cuff. Ty Johnson might be a guy you're looking at in deeper leagues as a cuff as well. He's got speed to burn, and the Bills like to use him. Isaac Guerendo here has got some upside here with the Niners. If something happens to Jordan Mason, he might be the cuff here. Saw 19.2 opportunity share, saw 5 carries. He's got 4.3 speed, so if he gets that volume like Mason does, if Mason goes out or something happens, he could be a league winner down the stretch and might be a running back that you want on your team as a stash play. Only if you got the room though. But those are some waiver wire dandies to look at. Who you trying to get off the waivers? Let me know in the comments below. Make sure to hit that subscribe button on the way out. Thanks for watching. Catch you on the next video.